Welcome back to the Annie Fry Show. I'm very excited about this next segment we're going to do. Most of you have probably seen the brawl that took place at Alton High School last week with a basketball game at their tournament between Alton and Riverview Gardens. Tony Colombo had not seen it until actually had you heard rumblings of it at least?
Oh, yeah, no.
You hadn't actually seen the video.
I had heard about it and read about it, but I had not seen the video until a few minutes ago.
So you're watching...
I didn't really want to see... I've unfortunately experienced that and seen that type of thing before, and it's just ugly and it's not pleasant, so I was sort of intentionally avoiding it, but then I thought I better watch it because we're going to talk about it.
Plus, I came over to your computer and said, watch it.
Yeah.
But you pulled it up and it was on Sports Illustrated. I was expecting you to go to some local news outlet, and you found it, and it's national news.
You Google it, and it's all over the place.
So in order to talk about this, the reason why we're going to have the conversation that we're going to have right now is because Alton Riverview Gardens happened. There are discussions taking place today about what kind of discipline is going to be involved. There are criminal charges that could be filed. They might opt not to, whatever the case might be. This is a serious issue. However, this isn't like the first time a basketball game or a youth sporting game event has gotten out of hand. And I will add, they don't even have to be over 10 years old for a game to get out of hand anymore. So in order to talk about this, I invited into the studio Joe Rusch, who worked... How long did you work with 97.1 up until earlier this year? I mean, you've 18 years with the whole time that the station's been around, right?
Yeah, I was with the station when we put it on the air way back in 2000.
So you're very familiar with the 97.1 family, and everybody loves you. You know Mark Close a little bit? You're related?
I can't confirm that on that.
You want to be
Smart
tied
move,
to it.
Joe. Smart move.
But Mark Close is a beloved member of the 97.1 family, and he is also an official. So from an official standpoint, what's your resume in a nutshell?
I've done 46 seasons of high school sports, 26 in basketball, and this is my 21st in football.
Awesome. And so you're doing high school level sports for 46 years. I'm sure that you've seen a lot of things.
46 seasons, not years. I don't want to be that old, Scott. For
True. That would make you 97. And then we have Scott in studio with us, too, as well. Scott, you are also an official. You came highly recommended by one Joe Rusch, so we trust you automatically. Tell us about yourself.
I've also, I guess I'd say, a fairly extensive officiating background. I've done football for 30 years.
Yeah.
I referee on the college level and high school level, and when I have time, the Pee Wee level. And I've done high school basketball for 18 years. And I do high school, and I do tiny bit of college and a lot of little kid stuff, too.
Awesome. Okay, so I myself am an IHSA in Illinois volleyball official, and I've been doing that for about a decade. I was an athlete. It's a great way as a former athlete to stay in touch with the game, and then it becomes its own thing. It's not like playing, but it's being a part of an atmosphere that I always enjoyed as a four-sport athlete in high school as a way to continue that. I'm sure you guys probably have some enjoyment just being able to participate in the sports culture still after 46 seasons.
It's one of those things that forces you to stay in shape.
Yeah, that's also true.
And it's physical and it's mental. I mean, this last night I worked with a good friend of
a demonstration of Wirecast.
I work with a good friend of...
this is good friend calling right now.
A good friend of, and I told him I'd even give a shout out, Steve Greer.
Yeah.
Who is, I'm not going to say his name, but I want to be him in 10 years.
Oh, really?
He's been officiating for decades, and he's in phenomenal shape mentally, physically, and that's just what being an official can do for you if you do it correctly.
That's right. Yeah, my dad also does, he does like 6 sports. He does football in Illinois. He does high school level football, basketball, softball, baseball, and volleyball. And that's like his retirement. I think he works more now than he did before, but he gets to make his own schedule and he gets to put a few dollars in the bank and you get to stay active. Joe, over those 46 seasons, is it the same as it was 46 seasons ago? Has it changed drastically?
I don't think it's changed drastically, but you can feel a certain tension that continues to rise, and it depends on the game. I mean, I did a game the other night. It was... My first basketball game was Monday night, and it was uneventful completely, which is the vast majority of the games. Unfortunately, you're not going to see news coverage of the 99% of the games that go off with great sportsmanship. The kids shake hands at the end, and it's over. But yeah, so the vast majority of the games are fantastic. And what Scott was saying too is that there's a fraternity / sorority, because I work with female officials too, that we all enjoy each other's company. We can share war stories. And that's part of it for officials too.
So watching what took place at the Alton Riverview basketball game, there are a couple of things that are important to set the table. First of all, this wasn't just an altercation that took place between children. There were adults that were involved in the stands, that became involved during the course of the game. This isn't something that is specific to basketball. It's not something specific to high school level sporting events. But I think what you definitely will see consistent, at least in my experience, especially watching, I like to go watch my husband umpire baseball because I like to watch baseball. You go watch him do a game, and I sit there. I've got pretty thick skin. And, you hear people chirping. And that's what you're going to hear at any game. If you don't like it when people chirp at you, you can't be an official. If they're not saying anything, they're not watching the game for the most part. But I've noticed a lot lately that this idea of, for instance, the officials, they are an authority in the gym. They are the authority of the game. There's a site administrator at a gym that as an official, you know who to go to in the gym. If something gets out of hand, they become part of an authority. The coach is an authority. Parents are an authority, but they're literally on the sidelines during an athletic competition.
You'd like to hope.
Yes, you would like to hope. So when, Scott, I'll ask you first, when you're watching something like what took place in Alton go down, how do you think that reflects on the status of culture today in youth sports?
Well, I have a theory, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
My generation, the end of, and Joe's the same, the end of the baby boomers.
This is a demonstration
Our kids
of Wirecast.
were the first, I hate to say it, the first generation of the entitlement generation. Their kids are now what we have to deal with on a court. These kids have spent their whole lives being pampered by their parents. Johnny can do no wrong. If Johnny makes an F, it's not Johnny's fault, it's the teacher's fault. So when they go to the school, they don't deal with why is my child getting an F? It's why did you give my child an F? There's no accountability anymore.
So when you were in high school, if you got an F, how'd that go down?
I don't play. My mother is on me, and I'm dealt with. There are consequences to actions, okay? Now the consequences are, it's whoever put you in that situation, it's their fault. So to your question, how does that translate to sports? Guess what? Anytime if you call a foul on a kid, let's go basketball. Why are they fouling my child? Why didn't you call it on the other guy? You're hearing from the parents. When I was a kid, parents go to practices now. There's nobody that's over 50 years old that played sports in the 60s or 70s or early 80s that could even fathom their parents coming to a practice.
Being able to stomach seeing them there. That would be embarrassing from the child's perspective for sure.
So parents, and now there's so much money in the game. Everybody thinks that their kid is going to be LeBron James. Everybody thinks
how many LeBron James have you guys seen in your season?
Jason Tatum. Yeah. I can say Brad Beal, David Lee. So we've been fortunate enough to see a few of these guys. But even their parents didn't act like that.
Right.
Okay. But it's the kid it's the little kid parent whose kid will probably not even make his high school basketball team. They're living their fantasies through their children. And their children get caught up in that. They're disrespectful at home. So what do you think they're going to do on a court? When a referee calls a foul, they're going to say, I got to really reel my mouth in here what they're going to say. But it's, the behavior, like Joe said, it's just changed because what they get away with at home, it's going to 100% translate to what happens on a court or field.
Now, Joe, I can, to compound on what you're saying here, I know from being in, you go to clinics as an official, they tell you the new rules, they tell you points of emphasis, things that they've happened, and now they've addressed it maybe as a statewide athletic association. They have a way they want you to handle this so it's consistent. When it comes to kids' attitudes, I know that in my experience from being a volleyball official, which is about as calm as you can get when it comes to athletic, the kids don't ever come in contact with each other. At least they're not supposed to. But when it comes to the way kids are acting with one another, the way coaches are behaving, I have seen in my 10 years, and that's not very long, an emphasis to kind of let them play. The idea of try not to insert yourself into the situation. But now I feel like it's coming a little more like, no, maybe we should insert ourselves. Where do you guys stand? What do they tell you to do?
Oh, definitely to be more involved. And one of the things that the state has done on basketball over the last few years
is Missouri.
Missouri State. Mm-hmm. There's a guy named Don Maurer who used to be here in St. Louis, is from here in St. Louis at Country Day, and is now a state administrator. And he's done a great job of trying to get consistency across the state, because people will tell you the way the game is called here in St. Louis is vastly different than how it's called down in the Boot Heel. And he has officials association, like Scott and I are both members of the St. Louis Officials Association, and they come to our meetings and they say, here's what we want called, here's how we want it called. We want hand checks. Used to be a joke. I mean, if a guard was guarding another guard and put his hand on his hip, it was not a big deal. Now, that hand goes on the hip the first time, it goes on the second time, they want to foul right then now. They want the game cleaned up.
Nip it in the bud, yeah.
And I get it. And the thing is, and what we're going through right now is this is the first or second week of the season, is if our friends throughout the officiating community are calling it that way in week one, it'll be great by week 3, because all the players and coaches, they'll say, we'll adjust. They'll know, hey, we're going to get called for this, so don't do it. And the coaches then help us by coaching the kids that way.
100% on what Joe just said. This past Saturday, unnamed high school from the Boot Heel plays unnamed high school here in St. Louis. We call a foul. The unnamed coach from the Boot Heel says, well, that's not a foul in Southeast Missouri. My partner looked him right in the eye and said, that's why Don Maurer is down there telling your officials what a foul is supposed to look like.
Yeah.
And it's like it's all, you know.
So you have these variations. You have different places in the state. You have different communities playing one another. You have a lot of communities that might have a lot of the same officials frequently. So not only are you getting used to like, oh, this is the St. Louis region, but you're also getting used to this crew that is at most of my games.
Well, more and more, though, one of the main assigners in town, a gentleman named Mark Probst, he is sending more St. Louis officials
out.
South.
Yeah.
And more more officials from the Farmington and Festus and Potosi, Fredericktown. They're coming up here because really it's 35, 40 miles. It's easier to, if you live in Oakville and have to go to Hazelwood Central, that's 40 miles. So if you live in Farmington and got to come to Oakville to do a game, I mean, that's fair exchange. So it kind of works that everybody can see things a little differently.
Well, let's take a quick break, and if you guys can stick around, right?
Oh,
You're
absolutely.
not heading out of here. Stick around for another segment. I want to get into the culture of this, and I want to get into
Me too.
from being on the front lines and being the authority in the gym that is often not respected, if not disrespected, what you guys think we can do to start it. Because I won't get into politics with you two, but the things that you're talking about, the way people are acting and behaving, it's the same thing in politics. It's the same thing in the classroom. It's the same thing in the grocery store if somebody takes the bananas that you wanted. It's a culture problem, and it's definitely evident in youth sports today. So Scott and Joe are going to stick around,